which is a feat in itself, right? Like it's a huge journey.
Yeah.
I'll let Parker explain. He was a high-level athlete coming out of high school, signed with UW for track, and had an accident or an injury that was life-threatening. And that's part of his journey. And I loved hearing Dina Briggs last night say, she said, I've sat across many, many, many therapists and psychologists, and we kind of have too with Parker, but just the life coach versus like counselor psychologist idea was such a great takeaway. I was like, should we talk to Parker? We should tell him what Dina said last night before we talked to Wendy. And yeah. So yeah, I'll let him tell his story because it's, yeah.
I can imagine. Go for it.
I'm waiting for the little this meeting is being recorded button.
I did. I hit it. Yeah, I did. It's recording.
Oh yeah, I see that. Usually you get a little notification.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess I was gonna start in on what I'm doing with the Flow Research Collective, but maybe I'll start in high school. I don't know. There was a point in high school, like around my sophomore year, when, for no apparent reason, I just became really fascinated with like these big metaphysical, philosophical questions. Who am I? What is the nature of reality? And it started with science. So I spent a lot of my free time looking at YouTube videos of like our current scientific models, you know, the macro scale and the micro scale, quantum and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I found all that super fascinating, especially the stuff with like time dilation and we don't know what consciousness is, but here's this, this, and this. And so essentially what I was left with was, okay, this is all cool, but really here I am in this moment and we cannot explain a lot of this. Like we have the Big Bang Theory, but at the beginning, we don't actually know what was at the beginning. And here I am in the moment that's almost 14 billion years old, but this is the newest moment of the universe. Like, and what is consciousness? We don't, you know, so it's like all this. What?
I have a podcast for you I listened to yesterday do you listen to Michael Gervais?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Finding Mastery a couple weeks ago with, what's his name? He was talking about, you know, where we're going and, you know, the sun and it was really getting big picture, like everybody's going to have to go to Mars. And like, it really got you thinking because he's, you know, in the end, he talked about a lot of different things, but, he said the risk, the rich people and the risk takers are going to be the ones who survive the big thing that's happening. And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I can get that far out there, but, you know, between, you know, thinkers like that, you do realize there are some visionary, the Elon Musks of the world and you know, but I'm with you, the quantum physics stuff and the like Jordan Peterson, did you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've kind of like stuck my finger in all of that stuff, but between Flow Research Collective, I really got hooked in with, I love Stephen Kotler and, you know, the concept of, I started getting into, because as an aging athlete, you realize like, okay, what am I obviously want to keep playing and doing what I'm doing, and as long as my body will let me, but is there flow state in family life? Is there flow state in parenting? I'm sure you've felt it, you know, like when you're in and you're like teaching something and all of a sudden you're like, wow, my kid, like we're in this relationship, we're locked in and they're getting it, and I'm, you know, you're both benefiting. Like that's the kind of stuff that got me going even more on the flow state, because obviously as an athlete you felt it before, but when you get to hook it into like the bigger picture of life, it's pretty awesome. So so anyway, don't mean to cut you off, I'm dying to hear your story.
And so that science really, and then being left in the moment with more questions, like thrusted me like inward, you know. And then I was familiar with spirituality, religion, meditation. So really the first path felt like meditation was the method, the tool, the interest. And really quickly, I got hooked on Alan Watts. You probably know Alan Watts.
Yeah.
And I did one of his guided meditations on YouTube. And that was my first encounter with this state of being that similar to flow, but also I've read about in Story of the Buddha and other mystics, just that deep self-presence. with no personal self, wholly present, effortless being, connected to everything, like just, you know, that state that I talked about, and that transformed my life. And so that really was a catalyst to continue on this journey. And so that happened a few more times. Fast forward to June of my senior year after I had graduated, and I was headed up to the University of Washington because they were recruiting me to be a pole vaulter.
Okay.
But I was doing a decathlon because I'd done the decathlon throughout high school and had success in a lot of different events. So this was going to be my last decathlon of my high school career. And I was on track to score over 7,000 points, which probably would have like maybe bumped my scholarship up a bit, because a high school decathlete scoring over 7,000 points is usually pretty well recruited.
Yeah.
And so going into javelin, I was super stoked for javelin, was feeling good. And then during our last stretch down the field on our way back to throw, I was doing a warm-up throw and we were about to end. So I think what happened was I kind of got a little out of focus, a little out of the zone. And I just casually did this throw, but I released late, or like I said, wasn't focused. And I released my javelin straight down in front of myself and then followed through onto the back end of it. And it ricocheted off my nose and went right through my eyelid here and went about like that far into my brain, like a little, probably a third of the way into my head. And so I fell to the ground. My sister was there. My dad was across the street getting Gatorade. And it felt like the javelin had gone down into my throat.
Oh my God.
Because of the nerve damage. This is all still a little bit numb, but nothing really. And I thought eventually when they said activate life flight and I was feeling into the accident, like this could be the end of my life. I could slip away at any moment because this injury clearly feels very traumatic. And so kind of had to experience with surrender, you know, deep surrender in that moment, which was peaceful. And then life flighted to Oregon Health and Sciences Hospital. And 8 days in the hospital. Then I was released, really just diagnosed with a really bad concussion because they didn't really know what was potentially going to happen, or, you know, it's like, oh, the brain can heal. But really he just had a little brain bleed clot in my brain. But 2 months later, for 2 months, I couldn't lift anything heavier than 8 pounds for the risk of having my brain bleed more. Mm-hmm. And there was definitely some personality changes in the beginning with like manic kind of psychotic type behavior and thinking, because my prefrontal cortex, talk about transient hypofrontality, my prefrontal cortex was just shut down. So
yeah,
it was no self. It was only all the things that I'd been passionate about around spirituality and science all came exploding through with no filter. Oh. So it was all like, there's patterns here, this is a sign, this is meaningful, I'm always in the present, I'm gonna go. And so that was that summer was filled with that. And then September I went up to school 4 months later, 3 months later, and couldn't do certain events like pole vault and hurdles for a while, but then eventually was training as a decathlete because my coach was like, you're doing pretty good in that decathlon, you want to train as a decathlete? So I've trained as a decathlete for some of that year, then went back to pole vault, and now for the last 2 years I've done the decathlon and heptathlon and had good success with that, and going into my 5th year of doing the hep and deck with my coach Toby Stevenson, and still very much on the path of self-awareness and deep embodiment with this moment. And this morning I read on your website, your blog, the one blog that I clicked on because of the title. I think it's I Never Sink. It was I Never Sink or something like that. And I saw that you had done the 0 to Dangerous, and I was just logging on to do. They have their new course, the Flow Trainer Accelerator, which is 6 course. And I was like, no way, you actually did 0 to Dangerous.
I did, yeah.
That was cool to see.
Yeah, it definitely helps me. I got a lot of insight out of that, and just like really simplifying life. And it's so, some of it's so intuitive, the things that they're teaching. Like you're like, oh duh, I should have done that a long time ago. Um, but yeah, Stephen Kotler's work is it's really incredible. And as a writer, like I've looked at because there's a flow state for writers course too that I think they do, that I don't know. For me, the journey of like learning and then applying, it's like you kind of want to like layer it, and because I'm obviously building my own business, and so you want to learn something, get it really locked in, and then be able to apply it to what you're doing. And I have a tendency, like I'm always wanting to learn more. So what I've realized is like, okay, make sure you got it down so you can really apply it. So
Yeah.
The only thing I've done lately, I did do a brush up on that Compete to Create course, is really, really clarifying and good. It's not as scientific as, well, it's more psychological, like setting a vision, setting a personal philosophy, those types of things that are really, really good in life. But man, your story, like, the trauma part of, like, I mean, so physically you're competing at a level, like you didn't have any physical repercussions from that?
No, no
Like,
physical or cognitive
so
repercussion.
what was the time frame between that accident and then?
It happened June 24th, and I went up to school September 25th or something.
Oh my gosh. Okay, as a mom, like that, how, like that,
Oh,
like,
so I mean, I was at work. I'm a nurse. I'm an oncology infusion nurse in Hood River, and Barry was there. This was day 2. So yeah, I was I was very traumatized, and that first summer was tough. Uh, but we were all just kind of in this survival mode, adrenaline state of
yeah.
trying to keep him safe while he healed. And he had some seizure type frontal temporal lobe epilepsy that didn't, the doctors didn't really clue us in that what the spells he was having were seizures. And those kind of lingered along. But I actually, a year later, wasn't feeling like I was moving on very well. And I would recall the accident or see a picture or talk about it or see a life flight helicopter, and I would get shaky. So I did EMDR, and
Oh,
that was incredible. Like,
really?
I mean, it worked in 4 or 5 sessions. I hardly was able to get upset at the beginning of our sessions so that she could do the rapid eye. I was like, and then, I'm watching her finger going, well, now I'm just thinking about what to cook for dinner, and I'm looking at your fingernail polish. And she's like, and so when you talk about the limbic system and trauma and reprocessing, that it works. And it was not processed, it was processed in the traumatic state. So
Yeah.
I had to dig everything up and redo it through the eye movement, which, I mean, I just found myself not doing well. And my husband, he didn't do any kind of therapy. He's moved on in his own ways. There was, a year later, like, I feel like he was still struggling. But guys are just different, and he's a very spiritual, grounded, great person. And we're a tight family.
Awesome.
And just having Parker here and okay and alive and competing, like that gift in itself has taught me about gratitude and just keeping it real. And then being a cancer nurse, I mean, I see people's lives get wrecked every day.
Seriously, like you have like every grounding perspective that I like. And I don't know if you've read my blog enough to know, like my 2-year-old, I had a near death. I pulled my youngest almost drowned. I pulled him off the bottom of our pool and had to do CPR on him, which I hadn't been trained in 20, like I was trained at like my freshman year of college. So, it was like basically 20 years of going to, I didn't really know what I was doing. But when you talk about like miracles or however you want to see it, people will say, how long was he in the pool? And I'll say, if I knew he was in the pool, he wouldn't have been in the pool. So I don't know how long he was under. And he was miraculously 4 hours later, he spent one night in the hospital. The nurses were coming in saying, we never get one that's not in ICU. And he was laying there laughing and, you know, sucking on a straw. And he's the one that's on the spectrum. So he's very drawn to the water. So now his story is the thing that has healed him the most is surfing. And he taught himself how to surf. Like a couple years ago, he said, I want to learn how to surf. And I'm like, okay, buddy, this kid's going to be 6'7". He is so tall and skinny. He cannot put one foot in front. He on land, he's like tripping over himself. And I'm like, okay, you know, I'm not going to tell you, you can't. He can stand up. He surfs. He can stand up on a surfboard. Like now he's almost 6'2". He's 13. Wow. And I'm like, so the thing that almost killed you, you know, is the very thing that healed you. Because when he went back to school, after that summer he taught himself how to surf, he went back to school and they did the testing for his IEP and they're like, you know, we don't think he needs the OT anymore. And I was like, they're like, what did you do this summer? I'm like, I didn't do anything. I took him to the beach. He learned how to surf. And it was just the paddling out. And like, I mean, for all the years I was trying to play and teach him to cross midline, like it was just the paddling and the water. And then, you know, that whole concept of what water does to bring calm to you. Yeah. So, you know, these stories of, I'm so, as a mom, I know that trauma, I've never done EMDR. And I've looked at it both for myself and for him, thinking like maybe cause he has, like when a fire engine will go by, he's never been scared of the water ever. But if a fire engine, he's like, when he sees sirens, he almost like blanks out. And he's super fascinated with, but in his head, I think, like, you know how that is when, like you said, when you see the airlift or when you hear, for me, if I hear a siren for a long time, you know, you get that like activated. So these things that bring families together though, like it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Well, and then after Parker's injury, I think our entire family, and throughout when he was in high school and started becoming interested in all the mindfulness and consciousness studies and that type of stuff, but especially after the injury, I think our entire family, we were learning together about it, and especially me and him connected a lot on mindfulness and consciousness and everything, and I started diving deeper, and now it's something that does bond us and something that kind of we have for each other. Like when we want to talk about it, we just talk to each other, and it's something really cool. So like you said, it's just events like that.
Yeah, that's such, and at your age, that's such a gift.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we always talk about that, like we feel different, and like, and I think that's something that we both want to apply to our career paths, and something that I was interested when I found out your background, like how are you applying for example, like optimism. That's I always consider that a huge core value of myself, and when people ask me, it's like I'm an optimist. So how did you get to the point to realize that you want to integrate that into like your core values and core trainings and the title of your blog and that type of stuff,
as opposed to like being mindful or like just all the buzz phrases that they're out there.
I know, you know how some of those, sometimes it's just that word, obviously it really just speaks to me. And I think before I learned anything, I mean, that is just something, if there was anything I was really raised with, and I have awesome parents, and but like my dad is just the eternal optimist. So like I just never, no matter how bad any challenge I've come up against, or how bad something seems at the time, like in that moment, I'm always thinking it's going to get better. Like this sucks, but it's going to get better. And so before I learned about mindfulness, before I learned about, you know, seeking mastery and like human optimization and just how do we get the most out of our lives, that was like the ground floor for me, because I didn't know how I was going to make it better. But I was sitting there going, well, I've always been a writer, like just a journaler, and that always helped me process. So the Optimist Journal, like that just kind of popped in my head, and I was like, yeah, that's it. And my blog really started just because I wanted my kids to have something where they could say, okay, this is what my mom was thinking. Because I always wish that that I had that from the past. Like I think if families know, you know, their stories, because like my story is laced with so much like generational tragedy that happened so long before I showed up. But, you know, people are strong and they just want to lock it down and say, okay, we're going to make it better from here, but we're not going to talk about that stuff, you know? And it's like, you know, when there's alcoholism in your family, when there's, I mean, on my ex's side, there's a suicide, there's, you know, things that like no one ever talked about. So how do you understand the imprint that that makes on a family when everyone literally can be doing the best that they can? It's just they're not aware. And then you get to an age where you're so scared to admit that stuff. There's so much shame attached to it, that I think that's what I think is so awesome about like your generation and what you guys are learning through. And unfortunately, like I always say, I wish there was something that taught us better than pain, but pain is such a catalyst for change. And so it's like something less, it's not something I fear anymore. You know, it's like, okay, there's something, because even this, like when I say, oh, my heart breaks, like my heart breaks for my son, but with the Stanford thing, like it's not like you know, you go, okay, it, like the path will appear, like just keep being yourself, you know. And I just like, I'm always looking for where I go from here, because I'm definitely just creating this as I go. And that's why I love these connections. Like, I'm so not a public person. Like social media is like almost a necessary evil at this point. I want to spread something positive, but I really appreciate like the deeper conversation so much more. Sometimes I think I would have been better suited, and not to say that I won't, but maybe starting a podcast or something like that, because the deeper conversation is always where it's at for me.
For sure.
And in this, the way the world is now, you know, I mean, everything is via Zoom, and you know, so but I am really
I love the opportunity for these guys. Just like, you know, it is kind of not very common to have the younger ones appear in this setting and this calling. And when I see the drug use and the social media effect on these young guys, I'm like, well, you know what, maybe you're supposed to do this now so you can be there for your peers.
Yeah, because the world. Have you guys watched The Social Dilemma yet?
No, I've heard about it.
I almost did the other night, but I wanted to wait to watch it with these guys.
Yes. Oh my gosh. After I watched it, I sent it to my kids, because I watched it on my own, and I am not like a real big TV watcher. I don't catch a lot of stuff, but someone at yoga had said, you got to see this.
Yeah.
And it gave me a couple days of pause, like, what do I do with that? Like, because even what I'm creating, I feel like, well, am I playing into that hand? Like, I don't want to be on like that side, you know. So there's so much in it. I'm gonna watch it again, but I think I will watch it with my kids the next time. But definitely check that out, because that for your generation, this is something, I mean, self-worth, self-love, that like knowing that your significance has nothing to do with the arm of social media that's like changing the way that we think, and you know, polarizing society. And it's pretty scary, and it's
a dilemma.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I would definitely recommend that. But like, I get excited about this because you guys, if you talk to my oldest daughter, I don't know if Mason knows Lauren or not, but she plays beach volleyball at TCU, and she's a sophomore. So she's very much on this journey like you, and she has these days where she's like, I feel like the odd man out all the time. You know?
I should definitely connect with her, because I know what that's like to be in that state of like, I want to express this and teach my peers and my teammates about how I'm living like this. Like, I want to share it with everyone. But sometimes it's hard when they
and when people, you know, people have to be ready to receive, and it's hard. You don't want to be like, I have the same struggle. Like, I never want to come off as preachy. I always believe like my one of my core beliefs is people are doing the best that they can with what they know, right? It's just a matter of how much more if you're willing to learn, like the sky's the limit, right? But as we get older, if you're not willing, you know, if you want to stay locked in one certain story, you just watch, and like the world either gets like this and you start to get to have these conversations, or it just keeps shrinking down. You stay in your own little, you're going to keep everything real neat and tidy, and everything's going to fit in a box. And I don't want to live like that. And I want, you know, this next generation, it's like, that's truly what gets me up in the morning. So this is like, you have no idea. It's hard for me to put a vision, like social media feels so impersonal. So to have a conversation like this, like I didn't know how old you guys were or like what I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's so awesome. So
I've been grappling with or thinking about another tension that seems totally related to this. Perfect timing. Been listening to a 12-hour series of lectures on Nietzsche, and yesterday's was about Nietzsche's thoughts on the individual and the individual will. And the main point was about looking at that individual and how the individual functions within the whole of society and is able to, and the influences that are put on the individual versus but then there's the family. And this lecture was talking about in the 12th century was really when that individualistic thinking and becoming your own self however you want to really started to emerge around the Enlightenment, and once romantic love was more emphasized and there wasn't that natural there wasn't that value of the family, and just that individual collective body kind of started to come apart into individuals. And so now I feel like we're really seeing that how that has played out into the social media platform, our personal individual beliefs, and we kind of can feel that tension and the need for coming together in this way, which is more about like that family collective healing with each other, through each other, in parallel with each other. And obviously there is a need to go within ourselves individually and really understand ourselves for ourselves, inquire with ourselves individually. But I feel like we have strayed from knowing how powerful and necessary, how needed that family is, whether it be individually family unit or community or educational peers. So that I feel like is the tension and the need that we're speaking to right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you so much. And I always hit that word, like when I went up to Seattle and did the day-long Compete to Create seminar, and Nicole Davis, she's a Olympian volleyball.
I work with Courtney Thompson.
Oh, you do? And Courtney was the other one that was there, and Courtney's awesome. Like, I love both of them. But we were talking about our personal philosophies, and she's like, Wendy, like when I said the word connection, I was talking about it in, whether, it's family, which I'm super connected to, or our chosen family, which is just, that community that because of the path that you walk, that you find those people that belong in your circle, that just make you feel like, okay, this is me, and this is and they never take anything from you. It's always a mutual, but that philosophy of being able to like work off of each other and add to each other, I think is what you're speaking to. And I think that is, I mean, it's the antidote for what the way that the loneliness and the loneliness that social media is causing, the comparison struggles, all of those things. And then you can play that out to the opioid epidemic, like there's so many things out there that are just constantly, every step we disconnect from ourselves, right? We add another layer of something, we're going to add something that's like an unhealthy coping mechanism. And then what that does to family,
the weed and the drinking with kids. And
yes, I know. And I cannot even tell you, like going through this graduation season, I'm just like, I just kept telling my son, I kept saying, Luke, I don't belong in this world. Like, I don't know what to say about parents who think it's great to like serve your kids alcohol.
Right. Yeah.
Or like, and it's so prevalent.
Or smoke with them.
I like, it brings tears to my eyes, because I go and I would look at him and say, like, you don't, this is the foundation. Like, and I what I love about memory is like, I remember so vividly what it's like to be Katie, right? Like, I'm sure you do too. Like, you remember that time, but we've evolved past it. And so much I see that pain in people's lives, like keeping them, stuck in that place where, yeah, getting drunk is the answer, or like, and then we teach that to our kids, because it doesn't matter what we say, that's what they see us do, right? I mean, it's modeling through action that is so. And I always I'm huge on gratitude, obviously, but like I always say, I'm super grateful to be me, because I've always been someone who's like, I can keep it simple. I get so excited about choosing my coffee mug in the morning. I'm like, I love plain old life. Like, I am so blessed that, like, that I just have always felt that. And it's not hard for me. I don't seek that. Like, I don't need the next biggest thing, which it's just finding that spot, that place in you that's calm, right? And I see people looking for it everywhere, with anxiety being so high, with there's just so many things that kids deal with these days. Like, I never knew the word anxiety. I didn't know what it was, and I was a worrier. Now I look back and go, oh yeah, okay, I was a worrier, but it never was allowed to be. It never got to the point, because it just I think we almost implant things.
You had a reason to worry, or a cause. You could identify why you were worried.
Yes.
But the underlying generalized state of chronic anxiety has it's multifactorial. And
well, Mason and I always talk about, like, because obviously we're in the college scene, we both choose to stay completely sober and away from drugs and alcohol, but we still enjoy going out with our friends and being with our teammates. And we just see, like, sometimes it's sad when you can see people relying on it every weekend, relying on it to release their anxiety and their social pressure and that kind of stuff. And like, people always say, like, oh, you guys have so much fun while you're sober, like, that's so cool. And we're like, yeah, so can you.
Yeah, I mean, and it so comes down to, like, but you're so comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, I think with conversations with her and my brother, like, that's, and all throughout high school too, seeing the same thing, me being the only sober person at a party. And then I think it does come down to, like, that being comfortable in your own skin and being so solid in my own self, basically.
Goals and having things in mind, and just being all of that put together, and having a reason not to do it, rather than, I'm in college, I don't care type of thing.
And seeing that path, like, you it's that vision. It's a vision for your life, right?
Well, it's kind of funny that you keep saying the path, and Parker and I developed this thing called the perfect path. Like, we always talk about it to each other. It kind of came about when I was going through my recruiting process, I think, in high school, and it just felt like the right term to use, because there are different decisions can kind of nudge you along your path, but all in all, there's always the perfect path, and everything is going to lead you through that path.
And I always say, be careful the word perfect, but they reassure me that it's not the perfectionism perfect.
It's just that.
I just wrote about that last week. Yeah. And that's awesome.
It's like our little thing, like, stay on the perfect path.
We were talking about that yesterday. Essentially, what it came down to was the values of mindfulness and compassion. If we can lead with that, then we will be opened to and funneled into kind of that perfect path, because the mindfulness, the awareness of what's going on, and the feedback of life, and then the compassion, being able to interact with others and yourself in a compassionate way, those are really the principles to be able to land within kind of that perfect path, and not be influenced by untruth, or being untrue to yourself, so then it's like, are you really on the path? But I wanted to touch on something that I'm grateful for, going back to the drugs and alcohol, because I'm a person in recovery, and that has really allowed me to see some really cool things. And I feel like the one that you guys were talking about with the anxiety and the social complexities, is I've noticed how, when I'm around my friends, and Katie and Mason have experienced this too, but maybe not consciously, how everyone is looking for not only the peace that you mentioned, Wendy, the calm within yourself, but socially, we want to be able to act freely, authentically, and spontaneously. And so one time when I was at a party, I noticed that how everyone being under the influence is allowing them to, maybe it's not their authentic and best self, and they're not making the best decisions, but they're acting in the moment, completely spontaneous and free thinking, and just acting without hesitation. And that's obviously lowered inhibitions.
Right.
But there is a way to integrate the self, to practice and develop the self, so that we can know ourselves authentically and then feel like we are acting without anxiety. So it's like the opposite of spontaneity is kind of that anxiety and that tension of not being able to break free. And so being able to learn through mindfulness, through your own methods, through just learning about history and scripture and stuff, you can start to learn what it means to develop yourself and be connected to our world, this moment, in the best way, if you will, in a way that allows you to act freely, spontaneously as yourself. And then that is really what we're looking for.
I mean, that's like our highest, I mean, that's what we're, the calling that you want to feel every day, right? I mean, that moment when you feel like you can absolutely just be yourself without thinking, you know who that is without thinking about it, and it just comes naturally. Like that's where everybody wants to get, whether they know it or not, because until you've had that moment where you're like, I am enough exactly the way I show up today, and I'm going to just keep, as long as I'm growing. And that doesn't mean you're perfect, but it means like there is nothing you can do. So you might to decrease that significance, but to be able to put it out there, like until you're really hooked into yourself and know yourself and have that core and know your core values, which again, if people don't sit around the dinner table and talk about this stuff, how do you get there? Right. I mean, that's like, I think the inspiration I see, like, and what you guys have in families, and what I have always really aspired to with my own is like, from the time my kids were as young as, like, I would always think in a moment of a temper tantrum, I'd think, okay, don't lose your mind, like stay calm. What are you trying to teach them? Are you trying to teach them to be more honest? Are you trying to teach them to be more caring? Like boil it down to those. And then I found out about positive psychology, and I was like, oh, the positive psychology traits. That's what I was trying to get them to recognize, what they, but it's that journey to self-awareness. So like what you're talking about, I mean, if we can get this going, like you guys are the community that I want to reach. And it's hard to do, but I have noticed, like, little by little, you start picking things up. I've had a couple of volleyball clubs tell me they're reading my blog. And you pick up a lot of, I will pick up a lot of, single moms, and there's struggle and everything, and there's beauty in everything. And, I'm so grateful for my days that my story is, I started my blog when I went through my divorce, but I've never wanted my life to be defined by that, because to me that was, it's hard, but it's just a learning lesson, and it's a process. And as long as you heal through it, and then you bring your kids along and help them heal through it, I don't see anything as, we've all been through, life-changing events, and we use them to grow, right? So it's just constantly keeping that growth mindset and moving on.
Well, that makes me think, that totally relates to what I was thinking as you were talking, which is how the challenge that I see is, I want to be able to be in my kind of my lane, stay within my talents, and utilize those and reach people that fit within those teachings. But also what I challenge myself with is, how do I create the message, or can I create the message that is going to impact and inspire and reach those who are on the threshold of becoming willing or wanting to change, because this individualist culture with, individualist culture with so many different ways we can exist, or feelings we can embody, identities we can take on. That's the challenge, is that we are given that opportunity. And so we may be born into this world as this free self, kind of developing who we are. And then through the pain and trauma that we experience, we may be pushed out of that, or not given the opportunity to freely express that. So then we take on identities that then almost continue to take us away as a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So it's how do we unlearn those and then reintegrate into that comfortable self.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're giving me the chills, because what it's saying to me is, when like we have these traumatic events that happen to us, I feel like we can go the route of like hypervigilance, like we're going to be that individual and we're just going to lock it down, we're going to be as strong as we can be on our own, and we're not going to trust anybody, and we're going to, like, if I don't do it myself, it's not going to get done right. Or we can go the other direction of like codependency and losing ourselves and needing someone else to help us define who we are, and being afraid to be that person that we were actually born to be. And what you're talking about is that, like, that beautiful spot of like interdependence, where we are all working from our strengths and being who we're supposed to be and growing on that path, but we also invite other people in to experience that with us. And like, to me, that is the most beautiful life, because I come across such strong personalities and super intelligent, like awesome people, but if they see life in that, like, a container that they don't let other people in. Or, you know, I've been down the road of codependency, and, you know, based on, you know, addictive natures in my past, and just knowing that what that takes out of you, and how far separated you get from yourself, and knowing that I don't want to see that happen to my kids. And it's like, you think you can handle something, and you're like a thinking person and a feeling person, but until I started seeing things in my own kids where I'd be like, oh, is that what that looks like? It's one thing for me, and you feel like you're sacrificing and it's the right choice, but when you see your kid in a situation and you go, that's not them, that, you know, they're now, you know, trying to create something for somebody else instead of being themselves. And that's like, when I see, you know, the two of you, like that relationship that you have, and being so open with your story, and, you know, saying like, I'm coming, you know, I'm a recovering, you know, addict, or what, like all of those things. I mean, when you say those things out into the world, like, it releases your shame, you know? I mean, when I didn't want to tell people I was going through a divorce, like, I was so afraid that people would think I was terrible, or like not want their kids to come over to I had a whole long list of things that made me less than. And the second I let out my story and said this to someone like one of the moms I was most worried about being judged by, she came out and said, I'm on my second marriage. Like, I'm like, you don't even know what people's stories are, you know, but people need, like, we are so much more connected to each other and healed by telling our stories, because we're human. Like, you know,
those stories are our feelings in a way. And that was the part that slipped away from me earlier, was how you said, if you're a thinking and a feeling person, and then you were mentioning your divorce and how your blog started at that point, it's like, that's the other half of becoming yourself, is that we, in American culture, I feel like we are not given the tools, and rituals is a good label for tools, in a sense, or coping skills, of how to understand our emotions. Because emotions, in my book, emotions are wisdom. They are our natural form of wisdom. And so really, those emotions, you know, in challenging times, come out, and you start a blog, and right there, that's dealing with your emotions in a good way, you know, and it's allowing them. And like you said, you release that shame. So it's the feelings and knowing how to do that, honor your feelings and process them in a honest way is like the most important part.
I'm like super curious wondering, and Katie, your story, like there's so much to this story. Like these are the conversations I could sit here and talk all day, but like I'm wondering where we can go with this, because you guys are a couple of really mindful athletes. Like this path is like, it'll serve you well in your athletic careers, but like to me, what it means to the world, like right now and where the world is headed and all of the doom and gloom that we hear out there, like this, you guys are like the next generation of like game changers, man.
Yeah, and we for the last couple of years, we have talked about how are we gonna get this out to our peers and other people in our generation if we want to have an impact on the world or our generation. Like,
besides social
that?
media, besides
because it comes to that dilemma. It's like, well, you need social media to spread your word and your teachings, but at one point, if we want to teach that social media is negatively impacting us, how do we reach out?
I know this is what I have been chewing on for the last week, because I was like really I'm really like scavenging on this online course, because obviously I'm a mom and I have kids to raise and I have to make a living, and I'm like, okay, if I could, what would my online course look like? How would I get people? Because to me, you can only fix what you're inviting in, right? Like I feel like you guys are the people I'm talking to, but you're already on the path. So how do we better the path?
Exactly.
Right?
That's what we've talked about so much. You can connect with people who have the same values as you, and it's so fun because they understand you and you understand them. But to be able to impact people who are, like Parker said, just on the threshold, almost to that point of being able to get on that same path. Like, how do we connect to those people, or even the ones that aren't quite there? How do we inspire them to make a change in their life? That type of stuff. And I have about 4 minutes and then I have to go because I have to get a COVID test actually.
Oh gosh.
But I do want to figure out a way to.
Well, maybe we can just keep this conversation. Let's do some brainstorming, because I do think there are ways. I mean, even just segmenting this conversation up and putting it out on social media, and like, I mean, as a starter, that but I definitely think there's a lot more. There's a lot deeper level to this, and I can't even tell you. I appreciate these conversations so much.
Whether it's connecting at CPA or something, because obviously I love volleyball, mindfulness, yoga, working out, all of that stuff, and I see that you guys have quite a bit of that over there, and Mason's starting to get there. So it's kind of cool to just know that there's that type of stuff to be connected with. But yeah, definitely continuing in some way.
Well, let's keep this communication going. I'll sit and think about this for the rest of the day and like figure out what we can do with it. But I love chatting with you guys, and we'll figure it out. I will connect you with Lauren too.
For sure.
Yeah.
You can probably find her on Instagram.
Yeah, you could. I'll and then will you shoot me? Okay, do I have your two? Are you guys both on Instagram? I know I have Mason's. And then
I think I followed you earlier this week, but I can just shoot you a message or something.
Okay, perfect.
My account.
Okay. And then Parker, like your story is a whole nother like these. It's there's so much here. It's like mind blowing. So I'm gonna have to just sit with it for a little bit. But and then as a mom, we could probably sit over, have coffee all day long. So like, I have more questions, and I kind of gave this about an hour too, because I have other stuff I have to go do. But let's definitely stay connected and see where we can take this.
Thank you so much,
Wendy.
Yeah, no, you guys have a great day. Mason, thank you for connecting us.
Said thanks for connecting that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Catalyst of this.
Look forward to seeing you. Is your are you healthy again? Are you?
I got the PRP. You kind of knew that. Now I'm pretty much going through PT, so I can't play. For like more weeks.
Okay.
So I'm doing PT, but now they're telling me that we have to do this quarantine thing, that I can't go to PT. But
Okay, and what's if you don't mind me asking, what's the injury?
Quadricep tendonitis.
Oh, okay.
It's been like 3 years, so it's like chronic at this point. I've done.
Yeah, tendonitis. It's brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Oh man. Okay. Well, good luck with that. We'll keep in touch. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Wendy.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.